Are you longing to feel connected and not so alone? Longing to be happy and more alive? Badass Counseling is excited to announce the creation of Community Plus, a subscription-based private group of folks just wanting to more closely share their soul journey together with like-minded folks and with me, Sven. For a monthly fee, you'll get bi-monthly live Q&As with me, Sven, giving you a better chance of getting your own questions answered. A private community feed for you to post pictures, successes, struggles, joys, even the occasional cat picture, creating greater connection and help for healing and growth. Random drawings for free small group sessions and drawings for private coaching sessions with me. Priority access to becoming a guest on the Badass Counseling Show podcast. Unlimited access to my DIY video courses, Healing the Soul and Unleashing Your Greatness. And so much more. Community Plus is for people serious about their soul journey who want real growth, real help, real laughter, real connection, and true community. Join us now at badasscounseling.com.
From the New York City area, welcome to the Badass Counseling Show, where the master badass himself, Sven Erlandson, takes you deep and gives balm for the soul, baby.
Hello, you have reached the Badass Counseling Show. Wherever you are reaching us from, it's terrific to have you here. Whether you are reaching us from the American South or Scandinavia, from Japan or Australia, New Zealand, it's super terrific to have you here. We are actually dedicating this show to the American South, from Albuquerque to Oklahoma, down across the plains of Texas and across Mississippi and Red Stick, Louisiana. Wonderful to have all of our listeners from the American South here, especially across all of our military bases there. We don't want to neglect our military base up in the north, of course, but it's great to have you all here. I am joined in studio by my primary producers, KC, who is ever silent over in the booth, and Rob the Rocket sitting next to me, mashing the board. Rob, what say ye tonight?
Button masher, that's me. You know, when you say great to have you here, Sven, I'm glad that includes me.
Oh, it's always great to have you here, Rob.
Thank you.
And have you had any earworm music lately?
No, I've been busy nursing a broken ankle, so I've just been feeling sorry for myself. No time for anything else.
Well,
but it's better. I'm okay.
And you recently had a family member get married.
I did. Went very well. Couldn't have asked for more.
And I saw the pictures, and he has, let me tell you guys, 2 beautiful daughters and a very, very handsome son with a very, very thick head of hair.
Yeah,
I've seen pictures. Rob had a very thick head of hair not too long ago, and I tell you what, Rob has been a handsome devil his whole life.
Yeah.
And you see it in his son.
You know, heretofore I would have said I had nothing to do with how great they look, but now I say, yes, I had something to do with that.
At least 50%.
At least.
And I've seen his ex-wives, and they are beauties as well.
Yeah,
so
well, yep.
I tell you, some good genes flowing in that family.
There we go.
All right. Well, we are joined for an episode here, another episode, by Chief Master Sergeant, retired, Jeremy Hardy, who during his tenure in the United States Air Force was the most senior ranking special warfare airman enlisted in the entire United States military. So we are talking to badass of the badasses. And he hails from a wing of special warfare that a lot of people don't know a whole lot about. The PJs, the pararescue, the parajumpers, who specialize in killing bad guys and saving good guys. They specialize in extractions and other things, and they are resourced by all of the other units of special warfare in the United States military because they have very, very special skills. Anyway, we are talking with him, and we hope to hear at least one good war story tonight. But we have brought Jeremy back on the show. He is the only guest we have ever interviewed on this show, ever. We are a counseling show, and we are a question-answering show, but he's the only guest we've ever interviewed because he promised us a year ago, and he made good on that promise in May of 2024, that he would open up his life about what goes on inside of not just the war stories, but what goes on inside of U.S. military fighting soldier, but particularly one in special warfare, and what goes on in his married life, what goes on in his past, and what are all the different things operating. And we discovered that it's a lot, not just all the things that happen from the military, but all that was happening before that oftentimes drives people into the military, and what a drug warfare can be, and all that war and all that the military adds on to what is oftentimes already there. So enough of my talking. Let's listen to the man himself. Jeremy, it is fantastic to have you back on our show. Welcome.
Thanks, Sven. As always, it's an honor to be here.
Well, no, the pleasure is completely ours. Start us off with a good war story before we dive into what's one you're either quite fond of, quite proud of, or not fond of or proud of that maybe haunts you. Any story you want to tell us, start us off, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, obviously, in last May, we did talk about, one that haunts me. But I want to start things lightheartedly,
Let's have a good, happy war story.
Yeah. So, as you prefaced, the rescue of General Goldfein, he was a lieutenant colonel. He was an F-16 pilot, got shot down over Serbia. And I took a 3-man team, not just, I was the pickup team, but 3 helicopters. We crossed the border, crossing the border, they launched 3 missiles at us, 3 surface-to-air missiles. So it was like flaming telephone poles coming at the helicopters, one of which missed us by about 50 meters. So pretty close call. I wouldn't be here if it had detonated. And then, flying to his location, taking all kinds of AAA fire, small arms fire. One of the rounds hit right behind my head. It hit the aircraft right behind my head. And I've got a math whiz friend who calculated the airspeed and all this kind of stuff, and had calculated that if the bullet had been fired 1/64 billionth of a second earlier, it would have gone through my skull.
Wow.
So, we took quite a few holes in the helicopter, but we got his location. He had an infrared strobe. We were on night vision goggles. We picked that up, and our small helicopter, we had 2 big helicopters full of Green Berets, and then our small helicopter. We broke formation, landed in what we later found out was a minefield, ran through the minefield as he was coming out of the tree line. And, there's a series of like classified questions, and, that there are things that only he would know that we asked to make sure he's the right guy. But then it started feeling like somebody was hitting the ground with a sledgehammer, and, it wasn't registering. And then all these strobe lights started going off in the tree line. I was confused. I'm like, there's not supposed to be anybody out here. And then my brain connected A and B, and I realized we were getting our butts shot off.
Holy shit.
It was muzzle flashes that I was seeing, and the thuds on the ground were rounds impacting around us. So the whole of these classified questions are you Dave? Yes, let's go.
Good enough.
Yeah, so we ran back through the minefield, threw him in a helicopter. We all piled on top of him to protect him from the incoming rounds. And then started flying back to Bosnia, still taking rounds the whole way. He refers to it as Mr. Toad's Wild Ride on the ride home. And then, as you mentioned, he went on to become the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the highest ranking general in the Air Force. To this day, we're friends. He lives just down the road. We get together, about once a month. I was just with him for a week out in Tucson. They actually found the helicopter that we did the mission on.
Wow.
It was in a boneyard in Georgia. This history office searched for years, and they found it. And they refurbished the tail. And so there was a big ceremony in Arizona to dedicate that. It's going into the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum.
Very cool.
So we all autographed it. Got to spend the week with him there, and he's into everything now. He's like on Google's board of directors. He's on the USO board of directors. Retired 4-stars don't retire.
Right, right. The higher you go, then when you step out of service, the higher you are in
That's right.
corporate
That's
America,
right.
if you choose. Right. Your history with General Goldfein didn't stop when you got out. He saved you.
Unequivocally.
Tell me.
I was assigned to the United States Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs as the command chief. So the senior enlisted guy there. And at this point, I was recovering from a hip replacement, which is why I took the assignment, because I couldn't jump, couldn't dive, couldn't fly. I find myself babysitting college kids, essentially, as the only operator, on the entire campus. My PTSD really started to kick in, and I was struggling. That led to some alcohol abuse, just not performing at Jeremy Hardy levels. And the Chiefs group was going to forcibly retire me. And the general stepped in and said, nobody's firing my chief. And he sent me back to Air Force Special Operations Headquarters to work weapons and tactics there, and allowed me to retire on my own timeline. And it didn't take long, but instead of getting kicked out, I got to retire on my own timeline around my men.
But then when you retired, your life went downhill.
Correct. And I've told you before, retirement was the worst thing that ever happened.
Well, for sure, because you lost your drug, right?
Lost my drug, my mission, my purpose, my men.
That's what I mean. Those were your part of your drug. And so
Absolutely.
How long was it after your retirement before you slipped into sort of the worst of the worst?
I retired in April of 15 as a senior ranking special warfare airman. And 3 years later, I was living in a tent, homeless, living in a tent in Tennessee.
Alcoholic?
Alcohol abuser. Yes.
Alcohol abuser? Did you have a
without
dog?
a doubt.
Did you have a dog?
Yeah, I had my service dog. It was just me and him, literally living down by the river. And
But without the van. Couldn't even afford the van. Chris Farley would have been disappointed. Okay.
I know.
And so then where does General Goldfein fit? Doesn't he fit into the story still somewhere in there?
He does. So he found me, and I was completely off the grid. Wasn't answering phone calls. I mean, I had my phone, but I wasn't answering phone calls, and completely isolated from humanity. And I come crawling out of my tent with a Nalgene bottle full of wine at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's my best friend. He said, General Goldfein found you, told me to come get you. So he drove from San Antonio, Texas to Tennessee to come pick me up, drive me back down here where the general had set me up with an organization called Warriors Heart. So rehabilitation program center. But it's unlike what you would expect a rehab to be like. They had a canine program, they had a wood shop, they had a metal shop, they had an outdoor gym. It was very pro-military. It was all military. That's where I got the definitive help that I needed, not just for the substance abuse, but for the PTSD and contending with the symptoms associated with my multiple traumatic brain injuries. And I've tried to do my best to, repay him by living right. I slip up every once in a while. It's human nature, but for the most part, he keeps an eye on me. Him and his lovely wife, his lovely bride Dawn. She's just your stereotypical Southern belle.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And they and their friendship to this day continues to help me stay in line. Not stay in line, but it motivates me to continue to live right.
Beautiful. I love that. So I want to rewind the tape. Last time we talked about a little bit about your marriages. You would think, being a trained killer, that you're just badass in every area of life, and you call the shots in every area of life. And people can't see you right now, but you're shaking your head laughing as you're taking out your dip, sort of getting a kick out of my saying that. Tell me about, you had 2 marriages, and I know you've met just a fantastic woman now, and we give thanks for that. And she's just salt of the earth, wonderful, wonderful gal. Tell me about the worst of your marriages and what it's like. What it was like for you. This is not necessarily characteristic of others in your profession. You don't claim to speak for anyone, I know. But in your case, what was marriage like for you personally?
I'm living by the maxim, the first 2 are practice. The first marriage was brief, 7 months. But she gave me my beautiful daughter. She was borderline personality and bipolar. So I do like them hot and crazy. And she fulfilled both.
Okay.
Both of my wives did, but her name was Ginger, and she's passed since. But
so then tell me about the second marriage. The first one yielded incredible fruit and a wonderful daughter. Amen. Makes it all worthwhile. Okay, tell me about that second marriage.
Yeah. Well, to go back to the moniker that we used for my mother, we'll call her Joy.
Okay.
Joy was a Marine when I met her, and incredibly beautiful, but extremely domineering, physically and emotionally abusive. I mean,
now we're talking about your wife, not your mom. You mentioned mom, but just for our listeners' sake, he is referring to his wife, his second wife.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So ex-Marine, extremely abusive, you said.
Correct. I have to take a little bit of, we'll get to this later. I have to take a little bit of responsibility, but I've never raised my hand to a woman and never will. So, and she was, she would swing and punch and kick and scratch. And, I would go to work with all these bruises and black eyes, and I would tell my men lies. Hey, I got into a bar fight last night, because I was embarrassed that this 110-pound chick was beating my ass on a pretty regular basis. When I drove onto base, everybody knew who Chief Hardy was. The gate guards knew who I was. Everybody who was anybody on the base knew who I was. And I enjoyed that. It was,
you earned that shit.
Yeah. But then I had to go home. And at home, pardon the language, but I was just a bitch. I did all the chores, and I'm talking the horse chores. I did everything. And it was never done good enough, and belittling me and name calling, and every day was a cycle where I would drive on base and I feel like a stud, chest stuck out, living the life, and then I'd go home and cower. And for an alpha like me, that was pretty embarrassing.
Forgive me for asking the obvious question, but why? A lot of our listeners aren't going to understand. Why? Why did you allow it? How did it ever even start? How does this badass alpha, everybody knows him, everybody fucking kisses his ass, knows that he could kill him if he wanted to. How does this even happen?
So at first I was willing to put up with it because she was smoking hot, and I'm like, well, this will pass. This is just a new relationship. We're working through, getting to know each other. But 14 years later, it's still happening. And, at that point I felt invested. We had a son together, right? I had made a promise to her to be loyal and to protect her and to provide for her. And it was hard for me, with my level of integrity, it was hard for me to give up on that promise. And so for me, abuse was nothing new to me. And I just figured I could take it. And so I just kept taking it and trying to maintain the promise that I made to her, trying to be the best father I could be when I was there. With the gift of hindsight, I should have left, within 6 months of the marriage. But I'm tenacious and I'm stubborn, and I was gonna keep that promise. And I'm sure you've got hundreds of listeners that are the same way.
Yeah.
It'll change. Oh, it's going to change.
Right.
Well,
Let me ask you this, Jeremy. You made a comment, abuse was nothing new to me, right? And that refers to your childhood, and we're going to get into that. And you've mentioned that when you were on the show before. But before we do, I want to ask you about this. So is it reasonable to assume then, would you say, from your reckoning, if you got into a relationship now, and I know you're in one and you've got a wonderful woman, but let's just say she wasn't in your life. If you were in a relationship now and a woman was physically abusive and belittling and name calling and so forth, would those, I know this is going to sound dumb, but would those be red flags now at 50 plus years old? Would they be red flags? Would it jump out at you? Would you have a boundary? Would you shut it down now?
Oh yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I'd probably pick up on the first date.
Sure, much more in
You
tune.
know?
And so why wasn't it a red flag back when you were in your 20s, 30s?
I was thinking with another piece of my anatomy.
Got it. Got it. And then you made the comment. It was very physical, and and beauty for men is a powerful intoxicant. Whether it's right or wrong, it just is. For a lot of men, it just is such an overwhelming thing that it just is. Okay, I get that. No shame in that. I get that. You made a comment. Abuse was nothing new to me. And so it's almost as though, and not just from the military, but you were used to being abused by the primary woman in your life. And come on, I mean, let's be really honest. How much damage can a woman do? Yeah, she can kick and scratch. And as a person who was in two abusive long-term relationships, physically abusive, as a big guy, it's like, I was choked and I was hit and kicked and all sorts of stuff. But in the end, I'm not trying to be a dick, but you're still a girl. I mean, you're a small person. You're 115 pounds. You're not going to hurt me. Okay. I mean, unless you take out a weapon or something, then obviously it's different. But it's still wrong. I mean, if you get to take out your anger physically, shouldn't I be able, not that I'm going to, but shouldn't I be able to? No. If I don't get to express my anger physically, you don't get to express your anger physically. Fucking control your shit, dude, miss. But they weren't. She wasn't. And it's interesting. Abuse was nothing new to me, you said. That's interesting. So you had been conditioned to eat shit at the hands of a woman.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my model.
Yeah.
That was, and obviously I know better now, but at the time, and part of that too, is I kind of subconsciously assumed this is what a woman is,
Right. This is what a woman is. And let me ask you this, on top of that, this is what a woman is, which is really tragic. That you were conditioned by your mother that this is what a woman is. A woman is abusive. This is just what it is. And you even said about your first wife, about Ginger, that neurotic, crazy, fucking all over the map psycho shit. This is just what a woman is. That's what my mom is. Of course I would hew to that. Of course I would want that. Anything else would bore me. You're not a woman. You're boring. If you're not, if you don't got your crazy on, right? This is what a woman is. Would it also be safe to say, Jeremy, that that's what you defined love as? That was normalized as love? That it's I get a little bit of love and I get a whole lot of being put down.
Yeah. And it goes back to the adage, that even bad attention is attention.
That's right. Because no attention means you don't exist.
Exactly. So, she loved me enough to beat me. As silly and stupid as that sounds,
it's not.
That's where my mind was. At least she loves me enough. At least she cares enough to freaking be that emotional, that reactive.
That's right. Because you're seeing me. Yep. We're going to be back with much more right after this short break.
I've read so many self-help books, and I always get something good out of them. But when I dove into There's a Hole in My Love Cup, well, it changed me. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. My copy is very dog-eared and highlighted. Thanks, Sven, for writing it. I love There's a Hole in My Love Cup, and believe you will also. Order your copy at badasscounseling.com.
This show provides soul counseling intended to entertain and inform and is not medical advice. Now, back to the badass.
And we are back with Chief Hardy. And we were talking with Jeremy about tolerating abuse in a relationship. And it's fascinating. Because, Jeremy, I've had clients, and I know what a lot of people don't know about you, Jeremy, is after you retired, a few years off, et cetera, you went through some hard times, and that you are roughly midway through getting your doctorate in psychology, particularly the intersection, a doctorate. Literally a doctorate in psychology to counsel people wanting to and already specializing in working with veterans and sort of the whole thing coming full circle. I want to help the very people who are serving the country and others have helped me and I want to return the favor. And, sort of you're in the teacher, sage, wise old man status, and yet you come in with clout. You know where they've been, you know what they're going through. And that's just so remarkable. And that such a mensch, such a powerful man such as you takes this stuff that seriously is a real sort of a brain scramble for a lot of these young guys, I think, and that's fantastic. And so here you are midway through this and going in and always, as you know, doing our own work and diving in and so forth. And so as we dive further into this notion, so many guys don't understand. I'm sure you've had clients yourself, veterans, and I know I've had clients who are veterans who have similar stories, that who they are on the firing line, who they are on deployment versus who they are in their personal lives. I know one gentleman, a veteran, who I actually handed off to you, that this guy, young guy, 20s, and he had done a tour or two, and he was just, he couldn't stop giving in his personal life, giving and doing everything for everyone. And I got to do more, and I got to do more, and I got to do more, that he had been so hardwired that his worth, he could only get worth by giving, and he could never do anything for himself. And he was being taken advantage of by loved ones and so on and so forth. And I know that because of his own stuff, he didn't, take advantage of sort of sitting down with you and so forth. And that was unfortunate. But the point is, so many people think of our veterans as just, tough guys and so on and so forth, but there's so much other stuff going on in there where they're eating shit in their own personal lives, or sometimes their personal lives aren't what you might think they would be. Thoughts on that?
I agree completely. And, when as a chief, running my own teams, that's where the counseling started, to be quite honest. As a chief, you're a mentor and a counselor and, a number of other things. And, domestic violence is rampant, particularly in special ops, the high ops tempo and the PTSD and the TBIs and our inherent attraction to the hot and crazy. It was an everyday event. You do unequivocally live two completely separate lives. Some people do it successfully, but most of us don't. On the battlefield, it's violence of action, move, shoot, communicate, accomplish the mission, compartmentalize all emotion, and then you come home and you're expected to be the perfect husband, the perfect father, the perfect neighbor, go to the PTA meetings, all this stuff that just is just the antithesis of our other life.
But is most of the domestic violence being committed to the best of your knowledge, or the guys you knew, by the operator himself or against? Because in your case, the domestic violence was being committed against the operator. In the case of the gentleman I cited before, he was being taken advantage of. And that's the oddity I'm sort of talking about, is these soldiers who are being taken advantage of or being violated themselves. That's kind of the crazy thing we don't think about.
Yeah, I'd call it a 70-30 split.
Okay.
70% being abused, 30% being the
Amazing.
abuser.
I have to believe that is absolutely mind-blowing for a lot of people. And I know your story well enough, and I have counseled enough veterans to know the truth of that.
These aren't your average military. These are freaking the tip of the special operations spear.
Right.
These are guys that, we're training Krav Maga and hand to hand. We're training edge weapons and firearms, and we're trained in the art of violence. And yet we come home and the vast majority of these men who are being abused just take it. They don't retaliate. They don't, they don't reciprocate the violence. They don't reciprocate the name calling.
They take it.
Yeah, they have the same mentality. If I can take it, then it doesn't need to change.
And so then that brings us back to this comment you said, abuse was nothing new to me. This is what a woman is. This is what love is. Even bad attention is attention. So then take us back to where all of this shit began, where this conditioning began, because it wasn't the military. The story is on your 18th birthday, you got the fuck out. What were you getting the fuck out of on your 18th birthday?
Yes, my mother was, to refer to her as domineering, it would be such an incredible understatement. She was very emotionally abusive, verbally, and incredibly physically abusive, to the extreme physically abusive. I was literally beaten at least once every day of my childhood. So you say, where does it start? Well, through EMDR and some regressive hypnosis, I can remember my diaper being changed. All right, I can remember back that far, and I can remember being afraid. And so what that tells me is, as a child, as a baby, essentially, or toddler, having my diaper changed and being afraid of this woman, that the abuse had been going on already for an extended amount of time.
Mm.
And it never stopped. And, in May, we talked about some extreme examples.
I want to hear them. I want to hear them again, because we had such bad sound that time, which is fine. I want to hear them again.
I was chewing my nails. I was like probably 5. And she told me to stop chewing my nails. And she came back in the living room. I was still chewing my nails. And she taped my hands down to a butcher board and pressed a knife into my fingers until it broke the skin, and told me that if I ever catch you biting your nails again, I'm going to cut your fingers off. And it's funny because until about a year ago, I chewed my nails to the quick. I just recently stopped chewing my nails. At one point, I did all the chores in the house. I mean, the woman sat on the couch and ate M&Ms. I did all the chores. And, I didn't clean the toilet good enough, to her demanding standards. And so she made me lick the toilet bowl.
Wow.
I remember I was at a babysitter one time, and my entire right ass cheek was just purple and green bruise. And the babysitter asked me, and this is how, this is just the mind of a child. The babysitter asked me what happened. And I said, well, maybe I sat in the tub too long last night. Like, I didn't even equate the beatings. The beatings were such a normal part of my life. I didn't equate it to the bruises and the welts and, and all the marks. When I was 13, getting out of the shower, she walked into the shower and she pointed at my penis and started laughing. She would bring my friends in and make them stand outside the bedroom while she made me pull my pants down and beat me with a belt. If I wanted to go out and play with them, that's what had to happen.
Wow.
I remember one Christmas, because holidays were no respite from the abuse. And I remember one Christmas, I walked up to her early in the morning and asked her, can I just have my spanking now so that I can enjoy the rest of the day?
Wow.
And I was young. I was probably 8 or 9.
Wow.
But I had that wherewithal that, hey, let's just get this over with.
Did she indulge you?
Oh, yes.
Wow.
Oh, yes.
Jeepers. And
yeah.
And so let me ask you then, it was so normalized that you told a babysitter, I guess it was from sitting in the tub too long or something. So at that young age with the babysitter, it was just sort of normal and no big deal. When did it begin to register? And yet we know at age 18, fuck this shit, I am out of here tomorrow. Countdown to the day I get to leave this fucking house and she can't touch me. Okay, so at some point it registered, this is fucked. When between, babysitter somewhere in your early years of, gee, it's just, I don't know, I just sat in the tub too long, it's just normal. When between the years of this is normal and 18, when this is fucked, when did it first begin to register this is hardcore fucked up?
I remember health class. I was probably 11-ish, 12 maybe. I remember in health class, they were talking about, hey, there's this thing called Child Protective Services. And if your parents are doing bad things to you, you can tell them, you can tell us, and we'll tell them. And that's when I started putting two and two together. But I was so petrified of this woman that I knew if I told on her, man, it was just going to be exponentially worse.
Wow.
And I truly lived my entire childhood in deathly afraid of this person.
In addition to the physical beatings and the belittling and the put downs and so forth, and the beatings literally every single day of your childhood, and the extreme things, humiliating you in front of your friends and all of this stuff, what were the messages you got about yourself?
I was weak. I was puny. I was lazy. I was worthless. And I would never be strong enough to stand up to her, which the day before I left, I finally did.
What did you do?
So she started beating on me. I'm 17. I'm the day before my 18th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And she's beating on me, and I'm leaving the next day for basic training. And I just put my hands on her shoulder, and I pushed her against the wall. And I said, bitch, that's the last time you put your fucking hands on me.
All right.
And then ran out the door.
Run! What did she say or do?
She was in shock.
Wow.
She was absolutely dumbfounded because I had never so much just rolled my eyes at her.
Wow. At what age, looking back, apart from the mental block, just physically alone, at what age do you think you could have, if it had turned into an actual brawl, what age do you think you could have taken her?
15, 16 maybe.
I'm reminded of that story of how they used to train circus elephants back in like the 1800s. That, when that baby elephant is born, they would put that shackle on its back leg and attach it to a chain. And then the chain is attached to a spike that they would drive into the ground. And the baby elephant would tug and tug and tug and tug and tug 1,000,000 times at that chain attached to the spike. And eventually it would stop tugging because it would realize, I can never get free of this chain. This is my reality. So then as that baby elephant grows, they keep attaching it till eventually it's a large elephant and they can attach that chain and put a 1-foot stake in the ground. And that elephant could easily pull out a 3-footer, let alone a 1-footer, but it doesn't even bother trying because it believes this is my reality. So it's fascinating. At 15, 16, 17, 18, you're still terrified. And I guarantee you were still terrified of her well into your 20s or 30s or whatever, to the point where her avatar, which was your second wife, it was just your mother in a different body, really, totally dominated you because you still believed, well, this is what women are. This is what a woman is, and you just endure because this is the chain and this is the spike and I can't pull free of this. This is what it is. Isn't it fascinating, the power of conditioning of a child over the course of 18 fucking years?
Well, and to your point, she came to my pararescue school graduation.
Oh my.
So this is 2 years of intensive physical and combat training. I'm a trained killer at this point. I was afraid of her then. I was afraid of her then.
And to put a finer point on that, when you were, let's say, 17, random age, what percent at age 17 were you afraid of your mother? What percent?
100%.
Okay. And when you graduated from pararescue training, you were how old?
22.
22. at 22, what percent were you afraid of your mother?
Probably still about an 80.
Isn't that interesting? And I'm going to ask a really fucking stupid question, but it's an honest question. What percent are you afraid of her today?
Not one bit.
All right. And when did the biggest drop in fear of your mother happen? What age?
I would say relatively recently. And as fucked up as this is, when I found out she was in failing health, I was like, okay.
I could take her.
Yeah. One, she's getting what she deserves. And two, there's nothing she can do to me.
Wow. So I'm not afraid of her, not because necessarily anything changed inside of me, but because she can't come and get me now or whatever. She's less physically imposing, whatever. And when you say relatively recently, pinpoint it if you would. Be honest.
The last decade.
The last decade.
The last decade.
Wow. That's so interesting.
And I'm not blowing smoke up your butt, but like the real healing from her happened when we started working together.
Wow.
It was easy to go, okay, I'm not afraid of her because she can't do anything to me.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't the emotional healing. Right. And trust me, I have not forgiven this woman and I will not go to her funeral.
Right.
But the actual being able to emotionally heal largely from that woman was with our work together.
And that's really interesting. And that's great. And I'm so glad that you did the work and were able to be freed of that. And just for the record, I didn't do anything. I'm just the guy that asked the questions. You brought the courage. You did the work. Okay. So it's not even I can say thank you. Thank yourself. You did the fucking work. I just asked the questions. But I want to ask you a sort of pinpoint question on what you just said. You brought up a really interesting point, and I support you 100% when you said, I have no intention of forgiving her. I think forgiveness is a personal decision, and nobody can ever tell anybody else, oh, you should forgive. Fuck you. It's a personal decision. Free will, baby. But I also know that you are a man of faith. You are a Christian.
Yes.
And so help me understand, and there are all different flavors of Christian, and every single person has their own relationship with God, and it is individual, and nobody can point a finger at another Christian and say, oh, you're this, you're not that. Fuck you. You got your own personal relationship with God. How does your idea of forgiveness fit in with the quote unquote traditional, you got to forgive 70 times 7, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
How does it help me understand? Because I know there are a lot of people that struggle with it. And this is such an extraordinary case. Is somebody required to forgive their abuser? And this isn't just abuse. This is child abuse daily of the most heinous, or certainly one of the top 3 most heinous types. What are your thoughts on abuse and forgiveness, specifically forgiveness?
Yeah. So first of all, the maxim, hate the sin, not the sinner.
Right.
Right. So I know it is in violation of Scripture. I understand that, and I'll face judgment for it one day.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing, and this is a little more hyperbole, but God would not judge us for hating Satan, and that woman was Satan on earth. I truly believe that and it's in violation of Scripture, but there are some people that are not worthy of forgiveness. I was able to forgive my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Took a long time, but I was able to forgive her, but not my mother.
And that can be between God and her. You meet the maker, and we can talk about it up there if you end up ever getting, if she ever.
I don't think she's going to be up there.
Exactly.
She's going to be up
there. Exactly. Right.
I think there's a special corner in hell reserved for her.
Right. And I can't say I could disagree with you. So let me talk about that then. They're hating Satan. So let's get candid here. You and I got real candid on the last episode, and you really gave us a window into what it's like and the hate and the anger inside of a lot of our vets still. especially the ones who aren't just the tip of the spear, but they're the most pointy part on the tip of the spear. That was you, baby. That was your people out there, okay? And shit, if your people, and I've counseled quite a few of them over the years, all right? If your people got that going on inside, first of all, you got every right to do it because you motherfuckers are doing something that I am very grateful for. Personally, my show, my team, very grateful for. Mad respect, all right? That being said, anything we can do to help them anymore, and I know you're dedicated to exactly that. So walking around with a lot of hate, a lot of anger, and that desire, that hatred inside doesn't go away. But we know, as we talked about last time, and we're talking about this time, that hate doesn't just come from the people who killed your buddies. Doesn't just come from war. We know it goes all the way back to, in this case, hating Satan. And Satan was under your roof, putting your feet to the fire, putting your fingers on the butcher block, laughing at your penis at age 13, a 13-year-old boy getting his penis laughed at by his own mother. Now, it's easy. It would be easy for somebody to laugh at that and say, oh, ha, 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 no big deal. Are you fucking kidding me? That'll fucking traumatize somebody's sex life. And anybody who's listened to this show has heard me tell of when I lost my virginity and, being laughed at when I lost my virginity. And so it's a lot more fucking traumatic than you would fucking think. And men are already performance oriented when it comes to sex. So you add on anxiety and insecurity regarding his male member at age 13 of all fucking ages. And then you add on top of that, licking a toilet bowl and having all these responsibilities, being beaten every day of your life. Yeah, I would have a lot of hate. In fact, if I'm really honest with you, Jeremy, I fucking hate your mom. I fucking hate her.
And so I want to touch on that, but or respond to that rather. But first, yes. So that one incident at 13, and I'm a huge believer in neuroaffective relational modeling, which is a fancy way of just saying childhood trauma manifests in survival mechanisms as an adult. That makes a lot of sense. Throughout my 20s, 30s, and early 40s, I was hitting everything I could hit when it came to women.
And by hitting, we don't mean fists, ladies or men. We mean other private parts with other private parts. Right.
I was sleeping with a lot of women.
Right. And there probably wasn't much sleeping going on. Got it.
Right. And very few of those were healthy relationships. It was just the physicality of it. It was my subconscious survival mechanism to prove to myself that I wasn't that kid stepping out of the shower anymore.
Yep.
And
that you weren't weak, puny, lazy, worthless, and never strong enough to stand up. And to prove all those things too.
By becoming a PJ.
Okay.
Yeah, I proved that by becoming a PJ. But that specific having my penis laughed at manifested in severe promiscuity. Mm. To the point where beyond healthy. Mm. Going back to the hate piece, I would posit that the vast majority of our best special operators have childhood abuse. Mm. And what we have either learned to or just by nature been able to do is to focus that hatred from our past abuse onto our specific objective, giving us the violence of action, which is required in direct action missions,
Makes sense.
Not everybody can focus it. Sometimes it becomes, problematic. And, that's why we have, operators doing some awful things on the battlefield sometimes. But I think the vast majority of them have a history in childhood abuse. It's nothing we talk about. We don't sit around the debrief table and talk about what mommy did to us.
Right.
But I think the special operations community feeds on abused men. Men who have passed, because they psychologically realize that, the psychologists that develop these training programs realize that, they can help us focus that negative energy, that hatred,
right,
towards the enemy.
And then what happens when they get out?
Well, there's no focus. There's no outlet for that anymore.
Right. Right.
That's when they start drinking and they start using, and they start getting into, risky behaviors. And, retirement's a tough thing for an operator.
And so whether in retirement or when active, does the source of the self-loathing, does the source of the problems, the real source, not what it's being channeled into. And if it's being channeled to get shit done, hey, fuck, God bless them. All right. If they're willing to do that, if everybody's voluntary here, great. But does the source ever get addressed so that long term, these men can have fulfilling lives and not be burdened by pain that they've been carrying now for 3, 4, 5 decades? Does anyone ever drill down to the source and heal the childhood shit?
I'd posit that most don't. If some people do, but I would posit that most do not. But I think what softens the blow and kind of moots that internal angst is the pride that they have over what they were able to do with their time and service, their service to their team, their service to their community. I think that softens it, but but it never goes away. I still have nightmares about that woman. I'm 52 years old. I've worked through it with you, but it still pops up every once in a while.
And so let me ask you then, if you were to boil it down to one sentence, what do you hate her for most?
Her actions are proof that she never loved me. You can't love somebody and do those kind of things.
And that's excellent. She never loved me. And so then the effect on the child in one sentence or less, the effect on that beautiful, sweet, kind, brilliant, creative, cranky if he didn't get a nap, the effect on that wonderful little boy in one sentence or less of never being loved was what?
Unequivocally crushed my spirit. And I am so grateful, and for your listeners who've never served, they may not be able to relate to this, but I am so grateful for pararescue because it gave me my spirit back. My spirit was so crushed. The training was hard, but for me mentally it was easy. I'm like, dude, I've been through
worse. I was groomed for this at 2. You cocksuckers are just catching up now. When does the hard part start?
But I was still meek. I was still shy. I was still, false bravado, but really it was all false bravado. But through my service, being on the team for as long as I was, it gave me my spirit back. And I feel my spirit's healed now. I feel confident in who I am. But I'm still not ready to forgive her.
And no one's, I ain't asking you to, it's like, that's between her and the good Lord, right? You have every good reason. Any person who's been abused, and especially to such an extraordinary degree as a child, it's like anybody who would push you to do that's just fucked. What do you think it is then that is needed because there's such a stigma about going into, childhood shit and healing childhood shit. Now with the special warfare folk, obviously, there's more there, as you said. Very often there's more in that childhood. What do you think is the sort of hurdle that has to be crossed in order for more military folk to give themselves permission to do it or to see it as okay or cool or necessary? Does their life finally have to fall apart before they finally do it? Or can something happen? What needs to happen inside of them before they see it as it's okay, necessary, and good?
Well, before it can happen inside of them, it has to happen societally. We've got to find a way to crush the stigma that mental health is a weakness, that allowing yourself to be abused is a weakness. And then But aside of that, it's entirely individualistic. Some men and women, for that matter, will never seek out help, and they're going to continue to, find some kind of negative, outlet, and quite often it's substance abuse, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping to change as a psychologist, is to crush the stigma.
I love
and
that.
and let them know, hey man, it's okay. Let me tell you a freaking story, and then open the floodgates.
Yep. Yeah. And if anybody's going to command their attention by telling a story, because you got all the stories and you were creme de la creme and so forth, you have the respect the second you walk in the fucking room. So they're already fucking listening, right? You got all the street cred in the world, which is fantastic. What enabled you to cross the hurdle of no longer seeing mental health as weakness?
I hit rock bottom.
That's what it took.
I absolutely hit. In fact, I was in rock bottom's basement. And I don't mind sharing this with your listeners. I had a plan. I was going to kill myself. I knew exactly what I was going to do, how I was going to do it. I was in a recliner. I had my Glock loaded, ready to go. And my service dog jumped into my lap and bit my hand that was holding
Get the fuck out of here.
He bit it just enough in like a playful way, but it was like, holy shit, he's telling me.
Wow.
And he wasn't trained to do any of that.
Your dog knew and saved your life, stopped you from killing yourself.
Literally.
Okay. And then the second time, there must have been a second.
And then so that stopped the action, but it didn't stop the mindset. Right. I was still suicidal, actively suicidal.
Right.
So I had a plan. I knew what I was going to do. And a friend of mine called me and said, I want you to come to Orlando and I want you to try this thing called ayahuasca.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's that? He's like, just trust me. And, we trust each other. So went to Orlando. Again, I had a plan. I knew what I was going to do when I got back. And I took this ayahuasca, and it's a psychedelic. And I went on a journey that unequivocally healed that suicidal ideation. I woke up, so, it lasts like 4 to 6 hours. I woke up from the experience, and it was such a profound, beautiful, mind-expanding experience that I looked at the world and the universe completely different. And I saw the beauty in the grass and the leaves, and I felt the love in my heart for myself and for my fellow man. And I'm like, why would I want to end this? And that was the healing from the suicidal ideation.
And this is very, very new, and it's not approved by a lot of this psychology industry, but that is changing. And you do not claim that it is a cure-all in and of itself, but in this case, it cracked open a whole lot of healing, and it made the suicidal stuff sort of go away and enabled you to gave you a reason to live, because it enabled you to see beyond the darkness of what you were living in. Is that somewhat of a characterization?
Yeah, it is. It's not the mushrooms that are making you see colors. You've activated, the visual
parts of your own mind.
Right. Yeah, and I do not advocate the recreational use of any entheogenic medicine, but under the supervision of a guide and a good integration coach post journey, I have seen. I was telling my PA just yesterday, she was interested in my work in entheogenics, and I work with a wellness retreat here in Texas where we do this every month for veterans.
Mm-hmm.
And so every month I'm watching men and women heal, come in broken and leave healed. Something I couldn't do in 10 years in my clinic. They're getting in a 3-day weekend. But they're doing it. That's the difference. This is the thing this is my rub with traditional counselors, traditional therapists.
Mm-hmm.
They want to tell the client what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of teaching the client to make his own decision. How do you,
right.
teaching them how to fix themselves.
Right.
Because it's not going to last. If somebody's telling you what to do,
That's
as soon as you
exactly
stop
right.
therapy, you're not going to know what to do.
That's exactly right. And
You know?
yeah, and I get clients who have been through ayahuasca. In fact, it's interesting. I had the opportunity to recently, one of my clients has had some big recent success in movie making in Hollywood and so forth. And he cites having a massive breakthrough through his ayahuasca journey. And then he found me. And then we sort of didn't necessarily work off of that, but that cracked him open. And then I could take him deep to help him find himself. Again, I'm just the guy that asks questions. I'm not trying to put anything in. Maybe a little bit of temporary scaffolding to help him find himself. But then my goal is to remove my scaffolding so that your own structure of who you are is in there. But I'm just the guy asking the questions. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. But I like the fact that it's guided and that it's accompanied with therapy. Because if it's not done right, I get people come to me and say, hey, I had this psilocybin experience. I had this ayahuasca experience, but now what? Or it's a year later and I feel like I'm somewhat back in the old place because it wasn't accompanied with that therapy that you're talking about. I think that's great.
Like you said, now what?
Now what? Yeah.
And that's where the synergy of therapy and the entheogens is.
Bingo. Well, Jeremy, we've come to the end of our time, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that because I know that is a great passion of yours, and you are doing some really remarkable things with the foundations that you're working with down in the Texas area in particular and with veterans all around, and you have a significant impact with all the groups that you're working with, and we're just so blessed to have you on the show. And your ability to go deep, Jeremy, and share your deepest stories and to do it without shame and to just put it out there. You have no idea. I mean, I know you know, but what a gift you are in what you talk about, crushing the stigma and the notion that mental health is weakness. And for somebody of your immense character and background and experience to so freely discuss this stuff and to share your own weaknesses and your own failings, but also your own insecurities in this childhood and the marriages it's such a gift. And I love that you do that because then you free up other men to do it. And this is how we change a society. It's when men who are in positions of power and women too, but men who are in positions of power and control and influence use their voice to say, hey man, I am mortal and I have fucked up and I've gotten my ass kicked and I have insecurities and I have this and I've gotten help, and fucking hell if the help wasn't the best thing that I did. And, through, in your case, the entheogenics and through therapy and so on and so forth, we are, maybe it's slowly, but we are changing generations to come. And you are, once again, you're on the tip of the spear. But now it's a whole different work of saving the world. And we are just in awe of you on this show. And it is really and sincerely an honor having you here, not just for your past, but for your present. For the love of God, you're doing what this show is all about. And we're so grateful for you that you've come on and shared your experiences and in wisdom.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It's you make it easy. To be quite honest, you're a good guide, and I consider you a friend. We've been working together for 2 years now.
Me too.
So you make it easy, and it started in May, right? I had no intention of putting out there what I put out there, but in debriefing in my brain, I'm like, well, I guess this is how you do it, but just, man. I mean, I don't think I'm all that special, but if somebody can, if any man, not even a military man, just any man can go, all right, if this dude can come out and be vulnerable and get the help that he needs, then there's no excuse for me.
And I remember those conversations you and I had beforehand and after the fact. And I said, hey, if you're going to come on, man, anything's fair game. And you're like, and you thought about it and you're like, oh. At first, you're like, yeah, sure, man. Fuck it. Yeah, I'm tough. I can do it. Let's do it. And then you thought about it, and it's like, okay. But I said to you, listen, man, we can edit out anything. All right. I'm not here to make you look bad. Of all people, I don't want to look bad. It's you. I'm not going to do anything to hurt you. And then after the fact, I'm like, if there's anything you want to edit out, and then you thought about it and you're like, no, I mean, no, let's do this. And it was a really courageous act last May, in May of 2024. Granted, the sound was bad because you had a bullet in your face that was an irradiated bullet from a Russian sniper. So if anybody wants to go back and listen, it was Memorial Day, 3 episodes, 2024. The sound is atrocious, but that's because this man had a bullet in his face that he was getting radiation for, or getting fucking chemo for, because he had a bullet from a shrapnel from a Russian sniper. So I think we'll give him a little bit of grace on the sound. I think we can handle that. But then he's like, no, man, we're good. No, leave it. And it's just like, holy shit. And then so to come back and talk about it more, and your metamorphosis. And I'm so glad that your healing is going well and you're in good spirits. And thank you for the last episode as well that you did, and really gave us an insight into the mind of the fighting man and the stuff going on in there. And it's just, you've been such a blessing to so many people, Jeremy. Thank you so much.
The honors. Thank you for the opportunity.
You
really,
bet. I love you very much, brother.
I love you too, man. And you've taken me down a path that I didn't realize I was going to go down, but you opened up a lot of emotional doors for me to take this, one step further.
And by having the courage to do it, you're able to do that for so many other people. And that's, each one of us, I'm just one beggar trying to show another beggar where to find food. So thank you very much, Jeremy. To all of our listeners, I know I speak on behalf of all of you when I say that we are grateful to Jeremy. Rob, any closing thoughts today?
Yeah, as the old guy, I'll tell anybody who asks me that retirement is a huge adjustment for anybody. But when you're a special forces operator and you've had such enormous abuse as a child, this is the most extreme example I can possibly think of. It's a crushed spirit that he was able to reclaim. That's great.
It really is. And he did it. Yeah. Well, folks, on behalf of my fantastic executive team here, KC over in the booth, who is in tears yet again, and Rob the Rocket next to me, on behalf of the team, to all of you, have a kick-ass day.
The Badass Counseling Show is strictly copyrighted. No copies may be made without the express written consent of the Badass Counseling Show, LLC. The Badass Counseling Show is produced by Karen Camparelli and Robert H. Friedman. Executive producer Sven Erlandson. Original music by 2-time Emmy Award-winning composer Trevor Morris. Have a kick-ass day.